Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. I was reading an article talking about a recent study that was done on Measure 110 that had passed here in Oregon a few years ago that decriminalized the small possession of illegal drugs. And now, when I hear a lot of the people's opinions about this, and even with this study, I get very frustrated because when you really look at this for what it is, it's an economic event that is taking place. But so many people want to focus in on the results and the symptoms, but not the cause. Now, they believe they know the cause, right? And they believe it has to do with the lack of law enforcement or the ability for law enforcement to use certain force upon the people, mainly, the threat of imprisonment or fines or, something of that nature, and then being able to, say, use that force to manipulate the behavior of people within the drug communities and all that, right? This is like a lot of the talk that you hear out there. Now, when I look at it for what it really is, when I look at it for the reality of what it is, why is it that people even want to do drugs in the first place? Right? They're escaping the reality of what the situation is. They don't want to live their reality anymore. They want to live in a blinded state of being, so they don't have to suffer with the fact that they are depriving themselves of the bounties that are available to them in life. That is the problem right there. And so it's an economic event that is happening. It's not a law. It's not a social thing. It's not any of that stuff, right? All the stuff that people want to blame, that's all symptoms, right? Those are all symptoms of the problem. The real problem is that there is no capabilities for the people in this environment in order to succeed. And that's why they suffer in pain. It's because no matter how hard they work, it doesn't matter, it doesn't provide them. They have a full-time job, they live in their car. Right? They messed up in life, and now trying to even establish anything in life, they quit the drugs, they quit the bad behaviors, everything that goes with it, now trying to reestablish themselves at 35, 40 years old. It's so difficult. Even just maintaining a job when you have no resources, no help. Right? And even the little resources that you do get are very few and far between, and only alleviates some of the pressures, but not the problems. See, the problem really comes is the fact that we are going into a type of environment of economics in which that the separation between the rich and the poor are only going to grow worse. It's not something that goes the other way. You're not going to find a rise of the middle class again. It doesn't work like that. You have a cycle to this system. And the ever-growing distance between the rich and the poor will continue to occur until the entire collapse takes place. So when you see people sitting on the streets wondering how come it is that they can have a full-time job and work real hard and do all the things that they need to do in life, or at least they thought they needed to do in life in order to succeed, but they still can't. Right? That's because of the economic environment. It doesn't have anything to do with political decisions. They can decide to do anything they want, right? They can do all kinds of stuff, and it might appear to mess with the economic environment, but it's not, right? The economic forces are still at play, regardless of what they do. They're messing with the symptoms. Right? And people confuse the results because of it. They think it was some economic or some political decision that is now, causing these economic conditions. It's not. The economic environment would have done this anyway. And that's really where I think a lot of people are missing it. And so they want to blame all the decisions that are made out there inside of the government rules and the law enforcement and all this, and they want to blame that instead of blaming the real problem, and that is that the new money that's coming in is separating the rich from the poor, and it's making it ever more difficult for the inhabitants to have and maintain a decent life from the normal jobs that they had. They just don't pay. They're not worthy enough. Right? See, this is why, following Cantillon's essay is really like gives you a better understanding of what is happening out here. Yeah, this essay was written back, 200 years ago, but when you read the increase and decrease of money to a state, and you think about what happens when new money comes in and how that separates the rich and the poor, how the dive into luxuries that takes place from when the new money comes in. I mean, think about this for just a second. This economic theory from Cantillon, what he said is that when the new money turns off, right, everybody falls into poverty. But right before that happens, the dive into luxuries is the sign of when money is coming in, right? The new money. Now take a look at the article I leave down in the description. China is now suffering with their luxuries market, right? All those luxury items that people were buying because of all the manufacturing and distribution that China was doing to the world out there, had people diving into luxuries because of the new money coming in from all the manufacturing base. Same thing happens here in the United States. The only difference is, instead of us manufacturing, we use credit, we use debt, we sell U.S. treasuries to the world, and then we use that credit to buy all the stuff from China. So we dive into luxuries that way. China was starting to dive into luxuries using their manufacturing base. As soon as their manufacturing starts to slow down because the rest of the world is not buying as much because they're heading into recession, well, all of a sudden their luxury market turns off, right? Because that's the new money. You can just see it happening. You don't have to guess why. It's economic forces at play. And Cantillon describes these very well. I mean, the drugs that people use, the drug abuse and all that other stuff, that's a result of depression. That is people trying to escape the reality, period. Right? And so when you understand it from that fashion, then you realize that what we have here in our particular area is an influx of new money coming in. Think about it. It's the West Coast, port cities. Everybody wants to come to, the Portland area or Seattle or wherever. And that new money that's coming in, that's separated the rich from the poor. And now all of a sudden, the people who have regular jobs can't afford the things that are around them. It's just the cycle in which it goes. Okay? And if you want to blame it on particular political decisions and stuff like that, it's easy to do. That is super easy to do, because you can come up with all the reasons and excuses and cause and effects and all kinds of stuff. And there's all kinds of opinions to have on it. Right? But all of that is dealing with symptoms of really what's taking place. And that is the economic forces that are happening. And this is really where, you think about it. If it was really this Measure 10, right, that caused all this massive drug abuse that's happening here in Oregon, and you have this rise of drug-related overdose deaths that are happening, well, there's other states out there that are doing far worse with their overdosing of illegal drugs, people dying from overdose. West Virginia, Louisiana, Tennessee, what was the other one? Kentucky, right? That was all listed there. Now, I'm not terribly familiar with the economic conditions of these particular states, but they sound like they're probably not the most wealthy states in the country. And what do you think you have when there's not a lot of money and there's some depression going on? Because really, if you have no means of taking care of yourself, or the means of taking care of yourself is very difficult because there's not a lot of money flowing through the system, then you end up in depression. I mean, just look at countries like that suffer with, low qualities of living. All of them suffer with drug abuse and alcoholism and all that other stuff, because that's the mental condition that people end up putting themselves in when they're in that economic environment. is that they end up like feeling that there's no hope, there's no way of making it. And when you start doing that and you start drinking, well, then you start filling your mind with the ideas of why it is that you're in this condition, and you start blaming other people for it, and then there's no way of advancing, because everything that holds you back is somebody else's fault. And until you can fix the entire world out there, you're going to always be held down. And that's the problem that ends up manifesting when you have that kind of environment. And I see it all the time. I mean, all the time. I know people personally who were hardworking people who just gave up, and now they're on the street. They like literally live on the streets now. And it's sad. I mean, at one point I look at these people, I said, man, we all stood at the same place at one time. I mean, we stood at the exact same place. We were sitting around drinking beers, hanging out, doing our jobs, having apartments and stuff. And now I look at what happened, and I think about what happened to this area, to this my town. I mean, it became very affluent here. I didn't even realize it took place. And as it happened, it occurred to me during the pandemic. I mean, I documented it here on my channel. The moment that I needed to leave and find an apartment because my house was being sold, the one that I was renting, I couldn't find an apartment. And I realized then, it was just like, holy moly, man, I might have to leave this area. Like, I might have to leave the town that I grew up in, my family, my network, everything that's going on here. I might have to leave because I simply cannot find a place to live. And then I had to buy a house. And I'm thinking, holy moly, houses are terribly expensive. How in the world am I going to do this? It took everything I had. And I'm thinking, I got a YouTube channel going. My wife works a full-time job. We were, had a decent rent that we were paying on this house. So I was able to save a lot of money, and I barely made it. If it was just two full-time jobs, just regular full-time jobs, there was no way that it would have happened, right? And I would have been out of here. And what if I couldn't find any place to go? What would start to deteriorate? What if I was in depression? What if I was drinking? What if I was doing drugs? Right? And what if this stuff felt so overwhelming that I couldn't handle it? I mean, a lot of people watched me go through it. I had high anxiety going through that. It was hard, right? I mean, if there was ever a time in my life that I ever wanted to start drinking again, that would have been it, right? But, I was able to get through it and worked hard and all the other stuff, and that's what it kind of takes. But you have to, work far beyond anything that would be what would have been considered normal. Like, if you don't have a full-time job, a side gig, working on a business, working practically 24/7, other than when you sleep, right? Even when I sleep, I feel like I'm working, because sometimes I dream about what I'm, about the next video or something. It's so over, consuming. I don't know why I'm babbling on about that. But I think you guys kind of get where I'm going on this, is that the laws that are passed when it comes to the decriminalization was not something that is not creating an environment that is a result of that law. Right? What it is a result of the symptoms of the economic environment that we are in, right? This is the results of that. Are these laws that are passing, the overwhelming homeless conditions that are occurring, the major separation between the rich and the poor. All this stuff is economic forces that are at play, and the political environment, the laws that are passed, all the other stuff is the results of that, right? They are symptoms, not the cause and effects of it. Uneducated economist, you let me know.